Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brad, and today we're going to roll our sleeves up and we are going to dig into XDTE, what it's about, how it works, and the mechanisms that they're using for their gains. This is the type of content you'll like to see. Stick around. As I'm getting closer to retirement, I'm looking for this income to live off of. So let's dig into XDTE. Let's head over to their website, figure out what XDTE is all about, and I'll give you some practical examples of what this is doing and how it's working and generating its revenue. So when we first go to their website, we notice that it's a weekly distribution, cover call, 0 day to expiration. They say that they get 34.88%. Well, that yield is a little bit off. My calculation of the current yield as of this distribution is closer to 23%, but that's still a great yield for what they're trying to do. There's high income potential because they're trying to take the glitch of how they're working their options compared to closing them every day and holding them overnight. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. As you can see, they have $46 million of assets under management. So not a huge fund, but large enough for them to have enough money to do their cover call strategy. So their holdings are the SPX, which is a synthetic cover call. Well, make sure we understand this. They do not hold the underlying assets. They're doing a synthetic cover call strategy. There is a difference between holding the assets and doing a cover call strategy through synthetic. With synthetics, they're actually able to write more calls than if they actually held the underlying assets because they can get the calls cheaper. Hopefully that makes sense to you, right? That they can get more calls out there because they're actually able to do more synthetics than if they actually held the underlying. The distributions have been fairly consistent, up and down, all the way down to 2 cents, all the way up into the 30s. Their average distribution, if you add them all up, is 23 cents. That's where we get into what are they actually making for a yield. Right now, yield is actually 23% when you take the average distribution against the price. So how does this work? What are they doing to generate this income? So what they're doing is every morning at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, they're writing a call against the position, and they're actually doing SPXW, so weekly. So when the SPXW is on the market closing every single day, so they take that day's expiration, they write the call first thing in the morning. They write it. It appears that they're writing it about less than 1% from the open. And that's important to understand. So what happens is overnight, before the market opens, any market gains they are receiving, we are actually going up in price. Our NAV is going up in price because of the pre-market. With a full understanding that all the downside, we're going to see all the downside. 100% of the downside, but we're going to see the upside on the market open. That is a instrument that needs to be talked about. So today, we saw a 1.26% gain on market open. From the time that the market opened to the time that they wrote the call, there was a 1.26 gain. Now, what they did is they wrote the call today. They wrote the call today at 55.30. So as long as we stay below 55.30, we'll gain 100% of that money. Unfortunately, time of recording, looking at my screen, we're at 55.40. Right? So we're into the money, not out of the money. So they were a little close. Yesterday's call was out of the money. They earned every single penny. We're fairly close. That's why you'll see today that Something like SPY is up 1.73, and what you have for XDTE is only up 66, because they're going to give back up some of that pre-market gain that they received on top of receiving that income from the cover call. So it looks like they're eating the difference of where the call ended and where they write the call, because all their distributions today, and I checked it this morning, their 19-1s all said it was return of capital. If they've been doing return of capital for the last 5 months, we would see a negative decline the whole entire way, unless they're making some positive gains here and there. Like I said yesterday, 100% of the gains we saw 100% of the cover call. It was a win. It was a win-win. This is actual today's, right? It started right there, 54.33. We opened up right around the 55.17. They wrote the call for the 55.30. This is actually what they did today in pre-market hours and market conditions. Hopefully this gets everybody understanding what they're trying to do. Yesterday was a win. They wrote it for 54.65. It closed at 54.55. So they got to keep all the money from that covered call. Today looks like it's going to be a loss, but they actually gained in pre-market. So we just got to keep that in mind. They gained in pre-market. They made the revenue. So we're going to see the revenue from the cover call, and they're covering what they're losing today from when the market opened to now, because the market went past their strike price. XDTE is actually going down in price. So that is how this is actually functioning. Everybody's worried about, oh, the NAV is negative NAV, it's going to go down. Absolutely not true. As long as they continue to grab pre-market and offset pre-market with what happens in the market and do the cover calls, it is not a negative condition for the NAV. Will we see a negative NAV? Sure we can. We saw the yen and what they did with their carry trade. We got caught up with it. QQQ or QDTE took a 10% hit. Now we're slowly coming back up, because we're only gaining pre-market gains. Keep that in mind, everybody. Pre-market gains is how we're fighting any type of NAV depreciation over time, right? We're gaining back slowly with the pre-market. So today I'm going to actually come out and expose my XDTE holding. I bought it on 8.7, just like I did QDTE. I put just under 30,000. Actually, I was writing in for 30,000, but due to partial shares, it was 29,998 at a market price of $50.37. On last Friday, I received a dividend on the 12th. I reinvest 20% back into the fund. I keep 80% and move it to another investment. I always take 80% and move it to a different investment or put it in cash, and I only reinvest 20% into all my holdings. It's just a rule of thumb. 20% is what I do. There's no math behind it. I think it's a good thing to continue to try to grow your funds over time, especially if you have a little NAV erosion, or you're not keeping up to the market, or there's a dip, and I'm taking that 80%, and I will tell you my 80% is going into another equity fund that is doing cover calls. You can say, why, Brad, have you gotten more into cover calls? During the pandemic, I spent days, weeks, months studying this, looking at spreadsheets, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And then when I see funds like this come out, I don't jump into them immediately. I give them 5 to 6 months for them to work out, figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it, and do they change strategies at any time. So far, they have not. So that's why I continue to invest into this fund. Last week's distribution was 41 cents. This week's distribution is going to be 38 cents, almost 39 cents. I have a projected income received of $231 this week. Last week it was $245. I'm taking $184 and I'm going to invest that someplace else. But I'm going to take $46.22 and roll it back into XDTE to continue to invest in XDTE, because I believe that the way that they're doing it will end up being beneficial in the long run. So there you have it. There's my holdings in XDTE. Hopefully this explains how it works, why it's working, what kind of dividends we can actually get out of it. Can we receive that 30 plus that they say from day to day? Probably. What I'm seeing is closer to 23. I'm good with that. I'm good with getting pre-market gains. I'm also good with losing on down days. All right, when the market is down, we'll get the cover call money. I'll reinvest. The market will always go up. If you're not under the believing of the market will always go up over time, then you don't need to be in the market. It doesn't matter QQQ, SPY, IBV. If you don't believe the market is always going to go up to the right, you don't need to be in the market. You need to put your money under a mattress. The market will always go up to the right. We will see dips. We'll see corrections. We'll see 10, 20, 50% downturns. A 50% downturn on something like this wouldn't be 100% devastating, because I'm not in it for capital appreciation. I am in it for the revenue, the dollars. Will it go back up over time? Sure. Am I going to sell it to spend it? I think that was a question here recently. No, I'm not going to sell it to spend it. I'm taking the 80%. And in the future, in retirement, that 80% is my money that I'm taking. I'm taking that 80% and I'm going to go spend it on my trip to Hawaii, or my cruise, or my rent, or whatever I want to buy. Lastly, this is not financial advice. This is what I'm doing. I'm hoping this is education for everybody of why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it. And if you like this type of content, please hit the like, subscribe, ask a question. There has been some good questions, and I'm going to do a video to answer those type of questions, especially if it gets a little wordy. Right? It's good video content to come up with why I'm doing certain ways compared to some other ways, why I'm in one fund and not another fund. Please ask those questions. I'll be more than willing to answer. Until next time, have a good one. And by the way, this will be the last QDTE, XDTE video until Monday next week, and I will have captured all week long what they sold the calls for and where we are in the marketplace. Until then, take care. God bless.